Hey everybody, welcome to the show, Wednesday show, right here, TYT Nation, around the nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. Got a great Wednesday show for you guys today. Now, if you hear a fan in the background, that's because I have the air conditioning on because it's fucking super hot in the end of September. I'm not saying anything except that I'm saying, holy shit, it's hot. It's actually very unseasonably warm all across, the Midwest and Michigan, Illinois, etc. And again, a little abnormal. But anyway, if you hear that kick in, it's because, and I know air conditioning does not help. I realize that, but neither does, of course, burning coal and getting our energy from fossil fuels. So anyway, there's that. A lot of you have expressed some good wishes, goodwill during this time of moving, and I want to thank everybody for that. I do appreciate your well wishes. It's going. I haven't took apart the studio yet. That'll be fun. Doing so, and that is coming within the next few days. So, again, you might start to see a little bit of a change in background, by the end of the week, or maybe even next week. Because again, I've got a very busy weekend planned. My sister's getting married, so that's interesting. That's going to be a lot of fun. So that happens on the weekend. So much to do. But no worries. I still have a great show for you guys today. We have Trump's. Oh boy. We have Trump's speech. Not so much the speech itself to the UN, but a very important reaction. We'll have a little fun starting out with that. Then we have the disaster that is Graham Cassidy and how it would actually destroy single payer in California. Then we also have the National Defense Authorization Act, how much money we're spending on the military, and who voted for it and who voted against it. Then we'll talk about Paul Manafort and the breaking news around him. Then we have... so there is a criticism of single payer. And it actually, I think, comes from a great place. But it's also, I think, in some circles, being presented disingenuously to try to warn people away from single payer. So I want to address that. There's an article out that talked about that. I'm going to break that down into pieces, and I'm going to try to figure out whether or not it's coming from a good place and whether or not it's disingenuous. So it falls into the two camps. That's interesting. And then we've got good news to leave you off on concerning the political revolution. So, all right. That's what we have for you guys. Before I get into the stories, I do want to thank some patrons for supporting us. Let's see. We'll start out with Mike Samuel, Hollis Hopkins, Jeff Curry, Jamie Miller, Dwayne Hendricks, Judith Hilton Colburn, Monica Flores, Ivy Coliosho. Sorry if I got that wrong. Seth Baker, Roger Holden, Aaron K. Jordan, Tom Anderson, Steve Lipke, Douglas Watkins. Let's go to some other ones here because I'm seeing a lot of repeat names. Jezza, new patron, thank you. Michael Oppenheim, also a new patron. Jill Sutherland, Amber Thompson, Andrew J. St. Pierre. Thank you to all those I mentioned and everybody else who supports us on Patreon. You're what allows us to continue to do the show. So thank you very much. From the bottom of my heart, you all are awesome. All right. With that said, let's go into the stories. And, oh, you know what? I forgot to share this on Twitter here. So if you guys could, who are watching, if you could please like and share the stream, that would really help us out as well. Sharing is caring, after all. And I'm going to do so myself right now. So thank you. And now let's get to the stories. Oops. Okay. We'll start with fun. So President Trump recently gave a speech to the UN, and wow. Look, I'm not going to go into too many details about what he talked about, other than he threatened to destroy an entire country of 25 million people, blame their problems on just Venezuela on just socialism alone, and called Kim Jong-un the Rocket Man. Which makes me think of the song, Rocket Man. Okay, I'm not going to sing for you guys, but you're not here for that. Well, look, disastrous speech. Totally embarrassing. Now, John Kelly is Donald Trump's chief of staff. Now, he was supposed to stop Trump from saying these kinds of ridiculous and stupid things. Now, obviously, we see where that one went. It turns out you can take Trump away from dumb people, but you can't take the dumb out of Trump. And, of course, in this whole speech, his stupidity was in full display in front of the entire United Nations. So, knowing that, there's your context. I want to show you Kelly's reaction to this speech. Now, this is from Mary Altaffer of the Associated Press. She captured these pictures, and these are great. So, this is Kelly responding to the speech. Okay, so there's one. Oh, God. Oh, caption this for me, if you could. Like, I'm going to try to caption it like, oh, God, I can't believe you just said that. And then there's my favorite. Oh, Jesus Christ. This guy's a man-child. Oh, what did you just say? Make it stop. Please make it stop. That's Trump's chief of staff. Now, look, seriously, though, I'll make a serious point here. To his credit, John Kelly has clamped down on some of the most ridiculous people getting access to the president. I mean, for example, Omarosa no longer barges in with the latest tabloidy news to piss Trump off. And then there's no more Daily Caller or Breitbart going onto the president's desk in the middle of his briefing. So, look, there's at least that, okay? At least he gets subjected to some reality during his day. And we do have John Kelly to thank for that. But at the end of the day, the president's still a moron. And it's fairly clear that John Kelly knows it. And look, speaking as an American, watching that disaster of a speech, I can say that at that moment, we were all John Kelly. Sad. All right. Let's move on to something more serious with deadly implications. That was just our warm-up, guys. All right. Oh boy, prepare to get pissed off, right? Okay. Now, the newest Obamacare repeal bill has a lot of terrible things in it, from massively cutting funding to healthcare to giving states the ability to waive protections for people with pre-existing conditions. So, again, terrible, right? Now, it would also funnel some of the money from wealthier blue states to poorer red states in the form of block grants. So, wonderful. Now, Republicans are like, oh, no, you don't understand. This gives power back to the states. We're going to give the power back to the states and away from that horrible federal government. Now, that's interesting because one proposed amendment would actually strip states of the power to set up their own healthcare system, especially if that system is single payer. Now, this is an amendment from Republican Senator John Kennedy. Now, like I said, it reportedly would ban states from setting up their own single-payer healthcare systems. They specifically, ironically, singled that out and said, "Oh, by the way, single payer bad. Never want to try it. You don't want to try it. We're gonna stop you from trying it, California." Oh boy. Now wait a minute. As I said, I thought they were for states' rights. Well, apparently not. As you're going to see, this is actually because they're afraid of single payer actually getting a foothold somewhere. Now, Kennedy told the Washington Examiner that, quote, "I think single payer system is just a bad idea." Well, hey, like, if you're an insurance company, yes, you would think that this is a bad idea. If you're paid by an insurance company, you would also think that this is a bad idea. But look, and the insurance companies pay people to come out and say this stuff and to vote against this legislation because they know that under a single payer system, they would be obsolete. Obsolete. This sort of reminds me of, and I know you can more easily make this comparison with, for example, coal or oil, fossil fuels, but I'm going to try to make it with healthcare, so bear with me here. Sort of like a horse and buggy manufacturer trying to block cars, okay? Or, again, in a more recent example, states like New Jersey blocking the sale of Teslas, right? And Teslas, of course, are electric cars that people actually want to go and buy and drive. And the car manufacturer is like, no, we're going to lobby, we're going to buy our politicians to prevent you from selling it here. And in this case, we're going to bribe politicians to not allow us to set up single payer. Okay. Basically, the industries are trying to prevent something from eliminating the need for them. And again, with single payer, we don't need private insurance. We can tell the insurance companies to fuck off. Now, Kennedy continues. He says, "I think if you give a big chunk of money to California," which, by the way, California pays more into federal taxes than they take out, so it actually mostly would be California's money that they would just be getting back. They're going to go set up a single payer system run by the state and then come back and say, "We don't have enough money. We need more." Really? Well, that's funny because single payer, one of the big draws of it is that it actually is cheaper in the long run. Why? It's because it gets rid of a very expensive overhead. There's less administrative costs. Current Medicare runs at about a 1.8% cost overhead. And look, part of that is insurance companies right now, they spend so much money on competition, which means they're, basically what that means is that they got to spend money to advertise, right, in order to get their message out there so that people will check them out. So a lot of money on commercials, right? Well, single payer gets rid of that. It also gets rid of executive bonuses. It also gets rid of all ridiculous overhead, paying shareholders. All that's gone. That's why it would be cheaper. And it's also more efficient because you wouldn't need that big corporate bureaucracy. Now, if any state would be able to set up a single payer, and it's been tried before in smaller states with no success because they never did actually pass it. But if any state could actually do it, it's California. Now, California is the 6th largest economy in the world. And again, it pays far more in federal taxes than, say, Kentucky or Alabama. So this is, ironically, this bill, Graham Cassidy, would be a giant transfer of wealth from richer states to poor states. Okay. Now, I think single payer would work far better nationally than it would locally because the federal government would have more leverage to lower prices, to negotiate prices with, hospitals, doctors, and drug companies. But nonetheless, single payer in California would still be superior to what California actually has now. Okay. Now, his next statement betrays just a little bit, at least in my opinion, fear. He says, "I think the only way we're going to solve the healthcare problem in America is through the private sector. I don't think states should have the authority to take money from the American taxpayer and set up a single-payer system. Some people think that's inconsistent with the idea of flexibility. But that's what the United States Congress is for. I very much believe in flexibility, and I know governors want flexibility, but it's our job to make sure that money is properly spent." We want flexibility, but we want to make sure that money is properly spent. Oh, you mean like basically giving states a free pass with this block grant money to plug their own state budget holes? Or doing things that aren't exactly related to healthcare? That's what block grants allow you to do. They're almost like a free-for-all. But under this system, under this amendment, it would be a free-for-all to do everything except set up a single-payer healthcare plan. The hypocrisy. No. Again, that says that he's super scared. Once people in California have single-payer and they start telling other people about it, oh, it's going to spread. The idea is going to spread, and already it has. Look, that's why the lobbyists, they fought so hard to kill it in Colorado. They fought so hard to kill it in Vermont. Again, industry lobbyists and groups and PACs that represents these giant insurance companies, they spent millions of dollars trying to scare voters away from voting in favor of single payer. But now that's starting to not work anymore. I mean, a larger majority of Americans now want a single-payer healthcare system. And California right now is the closest state to achieving that, even with Anthony Rendon having basically killed their single-payer bill. And he's facing a ton of backlash for that. So, but again, here comes John Kennedy saying, no, fuck states' rights. You will not endanger my health insurance profits. We believe in states' rights when it's there to deny people things, deny people rights. But when when you want to use it to expand rights or expand a benefit to somebody, and I believe healthcare is a human right, he says no. These Republicans come in and they block anything that goes to actually helping regular people. And of course, this shows you that Kennedy is another corrupt corporate Republican bought lock, stock, and barrel by these large insurance companies. That's who John Kennedy is. That's what this is all about. And so that's why he's trying to get this amendment passed into this horrific bill called Graham Cassidy. Okay. Speaking of wasting money, let's go to Congress. Nope. Yep. That's it. Goddamn. And right now we're having a discussion on single-payer healthcare. Okay. Now, there's a lot of moaning going on from both the right and the center about how we're going to pay for that Medicare for All bill. I mean, it's just so much money. The American people, they can't afford it. We're too broke. We're broke. While that's going on, while we're having this discussion about how broke we are as a nation, how we're too broke to guarantee health care coverage for everybody, the Senate just passed a massive increase in military spending. Now, this is inside the 2018 National Defense Authorization Act. And it says that we will spend approximately $700 billion on defense. $700 billion. That's even more money, by the way. This increase is even more money to the Pentagon than even what President Trump had asked for. So total $700 billion. Actually, we're going to give them an increase of $80 billion. Trump only asked for 50. Nope. And the Congress, they said, no, we're going to, Trump, we're going to give you even more defense spending. How about that? Cash me outside. No, literally. This bill also authorizes the production of 94 F-35 jets. That's actually about 24 more jets than the Pentagon requested. Are you going to start giving out jets to people now? I mean, the Pentagon doesn't want them. Sure, I could use a jet. Why not? I mean, it's our money anyway. If you're not going to spend it on healthcare, we at least want a fucking jet. Okay? No, actually, I would rather have the healthcare. But anyway. So, here we are, wasting all this money on the Pentagon. But the people who voted for this, a lot of them anyway, they'll complain about single payer being too expensive. No, get out of here. Get the fuck out of here with that shit, right? We're literally paying for 24 more jets than the Pentagon actually wanted. Why? Well, I got the answer why. Somebody's got to get paid. Now this gets worse. How? Because it's fucking bipartisan. Meaning that it enjoyed massive support among both parties. This won 89 to 8. 89 to 8. 89 senators were like, hey, you know what? More defense spending, more war? Wonderful. Let's vote on it. Let's pass it. Now, look, I expect Republicans to be like, no, go military. Let's put more money. Let's put trillions of dollars into the military. Yeah, America. But no, we had Democrats also voting for this. In fact, I want to give you some of the names of the Democrats who voted for this. Al Franken. What the fuck, Al Franken? Cory Booker. Kamala Harris. Tom Udall. And I think the thing that pisses me off the most, Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren, what the fuck? What the fuck are you doing, Liz? Jesus. No, let's give $80 billion more to the war machine. And look, nobody's going to bat an eye. And you know who voted against it? Kirsten Gillibrand, Pat Leahy, Jeff Merkley, Ron Wyden, Bernie Sanders, Rand Paul, Mike Lee, and Bob Corker. And there were, of course, 3 senators that did not vote. So there's, a lot of very progressive people voted against this. And you even had some principled Republicans at Rand Paul. And when he says, hey, I don't want to waste money on more war, I don't want to waste money on the defense, he actually does mean it. So good on Rand Paul for at least standing for that. And Mike Lee and Bob Corker as well. I don't much agree with them on anything else, but as far as being anti-war and anti-war spending and wasting all this money, then yes, I definitely agree with them. Now look, I'm very, very pissed off, especially at Elizabeth Warren. I mean, look at the amount of money she voted to send to the defense budget. You know what? That could have paid for free tuition for every college student in America. In fact, The Intercept's Alex Emmons talked about this, and he noted that the annual increase in spending alone, $80 billion, would be more than enough to make public colleges and universities in America tuition free. In fact, actually, it could do that and have a lot of money left over. Sanders' proposal to do that, to make public colleges and universities tuition free, would only cost about $47 billion per year. Now, that's actually less than what we spend right now on the hodgepodge of different programs and tax incentives for colleges, student loans, etc. Well, not student loans, but federal student loans, perhaps. But grant programs and Pell Grants and things like that. We actually spend more on that stuff than free college tuition for public colleges. That's insane, but we do that. And look, what have those programs actually done? Well, they haven't done anything for lowering tuition. In fact, tuition has increased by over 1,000% since the 1970s. But hey, who cares if our people are educated? Let's just drop some more bombs because Raytheon's CEO needs another new fucking yacht. And of course, the Democrats, most of these Democrats were perfectly fine with this. Look, the Democratic Party, it's not what it used to be. You know what it used to be? It used to be against ridiculous bullshit wars. Now we don't care. We've been at war for so long, this has become part of our culture. So these bills, this extra money just sails right along, man. While healthcare and tuition-free college, those are considered ponies. And look, even the so-called liberal media, which there isn't really a liberal media, pushes endless war and basically treats this as, oh, humdrum, this stuff happens every day. What, more money for endless war? Who cares? In fact, Adam Johnson, contributor to Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, he said about the media, neither Vox nor Washington Post will have pundits lament over where will the money come from for the Department of Defense. Again, well, we got all this money for war, but we can't feed the poor. And he said money for war is just like the tides. Well, you know what? Speaking of tides, there's a wave coming. That wave is the American people. And it's getting close to us to be for a time for us to start crashing in on your heads. Okay? Look, the American people, they do want Medicare for all. They do want a living wage, and they do want education. They want those fucking ponies, okay? And look, they're tired of you spending money on pointless wars and bombs and defense spending that doesn't do anything to keep us safe. It's time those people hold our politicians accountable and start demanding no more money for endless wars. No more extra money to the Pentagon. We already spent enough. You know what I'd do? I'd cut it in fucking half. Defense spending, cut it in half. Immediately. Use that money to fund Medicare for all and tuition-free education. Because we're done with this shit. And we're done with politicians that support this kind of endless war. Ugh. Okay. Let's get on to the next story here. It's another new interesting development in the case against Trump's former campaign manager, Paul Manafort. Now, according to the CNN, let me try that again. That was filled with all sorts of disasters. So there is another new development in the case against Trump's former campaign manager. Now, this is Paul Manafort. Now, according to CNN, the government had just admitted to wiretapping Paul Manafort before, during, and after the 2016 presidential campaign. Holy shit. Now, that actually means that Trump could have been part of those conversations. Now, now right-wingers are jumping on this going, oh my God, see, Obama lied. They did wiretap Trump. No, they didn't wiretap Trump. They wiretapped Paul Manafort. You know, if you happen to have been talking to Trump, well, what are you going to do, right? Now, let me explain how this came about and what these orders are. Now, like I said, there are two court orders to wiretap Paul Manafort. Now, sources familiar with the matter told CNN that the government first obtained a secret court order under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act in 2014. Now, that warrant allegedly focused on his work consulting for the government of Ukraine. So he was a big consultant for pro-Russian government in Ukraine. So Viktor Yanukovych. I have a hard time with his name, but so he's a little bit of trouble for that because he hadn't registered as a foreign agent like you're supposed to. Now, he had to go back and retroactively do that. So, again, he's in a little bit of trouble for that because he did not disclose it. It's a big no-no. Now, that warrant actually ended in 2016. However, for some reason, the FBI decided to obtain a second warrant, which lasted until early 2017. Now, that period of time is when he was Trump's campaign manager. Now, Manafort was speaking with Trump, so there's a possibility that there could be some tapes. Very interesting. Now, the second warrant was part of the ongoing investigation into ties between Donald Trump's campaign and the Russian government. So, make no mistake, this is a big deal, right? So this is the FBI saying that as far back as 2014, they believed Manafort was up to some shady shit in Ukraine, and that they had probable cause enough to get another to get a FISA warrant. And then after joining the Trump campaign, they're like, well, look, this guy, we've already been listening to him, and you know, he's been having these things with this relationship with Ukraine, which is very pro-Russian. And then here comes Donald Trump with some other Russian stuff. Maybe we should look into Paul Manafort some more. So they got another one. But of course, I'm sure some people will still say this is a complete coincidence. There's more. Last month, reports emerged that Mueller, that's Robert Mueller, had issued subpoenas for 6 public relations firms that had worked with Paul Manafort. And the ex-campaign chairman's spokesman was recently called to testify before one of Mueller's grand juries. Investigators were reportedly concerned that some of the intelligence connected by wiretapping Manafort included communications that indicated Manafort had sought Russia's help for the Trump campaign. However, 2 sources told CNN that the evidence is not conclusive. So let's examine that. That's not saying that there's not evidence. They're saying inconclusive, and basically that means that investigators cannot prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he did sought to collude with the Russian government in order to help Donald Trump. So what that says is that then there are still doubts, okay? And there's still a possibility that, yes, he did do it. It's just the evidence that we have right now does not prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt, okay? Now, the warrant, however, reportedly did not cover the time when Manafort, along with Donald Trump Jr. and White House senior advisor and Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, met in Trump Tower with the Russian lawyer, Natalia Veselnitskaya, who they had been told had possible damaging information on Hillary Clinton. So the warrant did not cover that. So they could not listen in on Manafort at that time. Now, if they had, it's possible they could have found out whether or not there was a transfer of information of value. Now, if there was a transfer of information of value, that would break campaign finance law and might get Manafort in a lot more trouble. Now, from what it looked like, though, is that they were still trying to find something along those lines. Now, something else that happened was the details of the raid on Manafort's home. Now, that came to light in a New York Times report on Monday. Now, they reported that after agents raided his home with a no-knock search warrant this summer, which, by the way, they didn't just, not knock. They also picked his lock. Mueller's prosecutors told Manafort that they had planned to send him an indictment. The story says the feds decided to pick the lock on Manafort's front door because they feared he might try to destroy evidence. They took binders stuffed with documents and copied computer files, looking for evidence that Mr. Manafort set up secret offshore bank accounts. They even photographed the expensive suits in his closet. Now, that same piece described Mueller's tactics in dealing with Manafort and dealing with the investigation overall as, quote, shock and awe. Wow. Now, and furthermore, it goes on to explain how Mr. Mueller has obtained a flurry of subpoenas to compel witnesses to testify before a grand jury. Lawyers and witnesses say, sometimes before even his prosecutors have taken the first customary step of interviewing those people. Now, they also wrote that at least 3 witnesses have recently been subpoenaed to testify about Mr. Manafort. This is Jason Maloney, a spokesman who appeared before the grand jury for more than 2 hours on Friday, and the heads of 2 consulting firms. Now, one of these firms is going to sound very familiar. This is Mercury Public Affairs and the Podesta Group. Wait, the Podesta Group? Huh, that's very interesting. That's headed up by Tony Podesta. I believe it's a brother of John Podesta, who worked on Hillary Clinton's campaign. Connect the dots, if you will, on that one, if there is anything on that. But that would be a very strange coincidence. Now, those 2 firms worked with Mr. Manafort on behalf of Viktor F. Yanukovych. Damn, I have problems with that name. That is, of course, the pro-Russian former president of Ukraine. Mueller's team also took the unusual step of issuing a subpoena to Melissa Lorenza. Now, that's a specialist in lobbying law who formerly represented Mr. Manafort. So look, man, they're not fucking around with this investigation. Mueller's team has been described as incredibly aggressive. Now, the Times compared this to when Bill Clinton was being investigated, and they noted that Ken Starr and Patrick Fitzgerald had never executed search warrants during their politically charged investigations in the Bill Clinton and George W. Bush administrations. But maybe that's the difference. Maybe this isn't just political. In this case, there might actually be something there. Again, we know the Russian government connected. We know that Russian government connected troll farms had bought thousands of dollars in Facebook ads. And we also know that they infiltrated Facebook groups in order to spread propaganda against liberals, progressives, and to promote conspiracy theories and right-wing ideology. They had all sorts of social media presence to try and push things like, oh, the immigrants, we got an immigrant problem, and we got a problem with gays. So, we got to stop that. You know who stops that? Can't say anything, but it could be Trump. And so we also know that there was a ton of Macedonian Twitter bots that were out there doing the same thing. Now, what impact that had on the election, in my opinion at least, is very limited. I actually doubt that a bunch of bots made liberals stay home or turned them against Hillary Clinton. I think the biggest problem with the Hillary Clinton campaign was, or at least with the Hillary Clinton, the election, I should say, for Hillary Clinton was turnout. I think she did not excite people whatsoever. She didn't campaign in Michigan and Pennsylvania. She didn't reach out to progressives. And look, she did worse with the African-American vote than President Obama did. She could not capitalize on that Obama coalition, okay? Now, all the Russian propaganda and bots, well, those don't excuse the fact that the Clinton campaign was just a terrible mess. Hillary Clinton listened to the consultants. She listened to the donor class. She did not listen to progressives. She did not listen to the base or the grassroots, and ended up losing to a clown. And of course, you can thank part of that to the Electoral College as well, which is an outdated racist institution. Nonetheless, with all that established, if a foreign entity tried to swing our election using propaganda, well then, look, we deserve to know the truth about it, especially if it did break our own laws. And I realize the hypocrisy of that statement a little bit, since we have done the same to other countries. And I don't dispute that. And I think that what we did was also wrong. Again, we've invaded countries in order to lower prices of bananas. Okay? And we've, of course, invaded other countries or influenced other countries' elections in order to get to their natural resources. So I understand that we've done this, and we shouldn't have done this. So another country decides to do it to us back. Well, you can think of it maybe as karma, but at the same time, we also shouldn't abide by it. Because no country wants any other country to come in and mess with their elections, even if it didn't have that big of an impact. We still deserve to know the truth of it. Okay? And look, that's all I want. I want to get to the truth of the matter. I want to know whether or not there was a deal between Russia, the Russian government, and the Trump campaign. I want to know. And I want to know what each side had to gain in such a deal, if there is such a deal. And look, with Mueller being as aggressive as he is and really putting the screws to Manafort, well, we do have a pretty good chance of finding out. Manafort's running out of money for his legal defense. So, and you know what? Michael Flynn, he's also running out of money. He just recently put out a call for a GoFundMe in order to fund his legal defense. So again, Mueller's not fucking around. Okay. And look, there is a chance too that we could find nothing. Now, that would also be beneficial in a strange way, and let me tell you how. It would be beneficial for this investigation to be over one way or the other, so that we could finally stop talking about it and actually talk about issues other than the investigation, issues other than the 2016 election, issues other than possible Russian interference. We can actually talk about things like, and I say we, but I really kind of mean more of the corporate media, the mainstream media, which actually tends to focus on this stuff more than they do anything else. I actually want them to start talking about climate change and the role of that it's playing in the current hurricane crisis, hurricane season. I want them to talk about Puerto Rico and their massive amount of debt and how we contributed to that. I want to talk about Medicare for all. I want to see them talk about Bernie's bill. I want to see them talk about progressive victories across the country. I want to see them talk about other things than this. So either way, right? As soon as the truth is known, then we can, no matter which way it goes, we can go back to talking about the more important issues of the country. And that's what I'm looking forward to. Okay. Speaking of Medicare for All, that's our next story. Let me see. And okay. Hold. Now, there have been a lot of arguments about why we should not join the rest of the industrialized world in guaranteeing health care for every American. Now, everything from, oh, it's too expensive, to, well, you know, let me start that again. Oof. Like I said, it's super warm in here, and it throws me off. Now, there have been a lot of arguments against why we shouldn't join the rest of the industrialized world in guaranteeing healthcare coverage for every single American. Now, I've heard everything from it's too expensive. Well, okay, well, why don't we ask people who voted to give the military an extra $80 billion a year why we can't afford healthcare? To, oh, guys, it's socialism. It's government takeover healthcare. But wait a minute. Wasn't Obamacare also supposed to be a government takeover of healthcare? No, it's the actual opposite. It's a huge giveaway to health insurance corporations. Truth is, there is no such thing, really, as government-run healthcare, unless you count the VA. Look, what Medicare for All does is that it basically would take your tax money and pay doctors and hospitals with it, instead of you having to do that. Now, that actually saves you both hassle and money. And, of course, the money part is the fact that the government is not there to profit off you like an insurance company is. Now, another argument is it's a pony. Well, you got us there. Ponies for everybody. Let's get everybody a pony. But there's a new argument out there. And I think it's put out by some very well-meaning people. And one of those people is Monica Potts. Now, she wrote an article for Vice where she brings up some valid concerns, some very valid points, but in a way that I think tries to scare people away from single payer. Okay, and let me read the tagline, and you can read the full article in the description, as I'm going to put it in there. She says that the health insurance bureaucracy Bernie Sanders wants to destroy creates jobs for a lot of low-income women who form a key part of the Democratic base. So, okay. Now, basically, that right there, if you read nothing beyond that, that implies that, hey, man, if you're for single payer, then you are against jobs and you're against low-income women, you goddamn Bernie, bro. I don't know if that's what she means by that. I hope not, but okay. Let's go and examine her argument, because, again, I think she makes some very, very valid points and brings up some, interesting information. Now, her argument, she lays out here, and what she does is that she acknowledges a major problem for-profit health insurance. Now, she quotes Bernie Sanders and says that, yes, indeed, a large amount of our healthcare spending is not spent on our own healthcare. She said that, indeed, by one measure, administrative costs for more than 8% of spending on healthcare in the United States, administrative costs account for more than 8% of spending on healthcare in the United States. It's more than double the average of industrialized countries around the world. Sanders' plan proposes a more streamlined, government-run system that puts the need of the people first. Now, so far, wonderful. However, here's where I think she might throw a little shade. Now, she says, and he promises to do it in 4 short years if everything goes his way, which, of course, it won't. Now, okay, first of all, I don't necessarily recall him ever making the promise of getting healthcare done in 4 years. Now, he did say that if it passed, his plan, if it passes, which in itself is a long-haul proposition, would be phased out, or would be phased in, I should say, in just over 4 years. So, okay, saying that gives the impression that he thinks that this fight might be done in 4 years, but actually not. That aside, and that's just a small nitpick here, here's where we're getting to the crux of her argument. She says all of that bloated spending does something else single-payer fans would do well to grapple with. It creates jobs. Often, these are good jobs, especially for people with a modest education. And what happens to those people, who are mostly women, is something Democrats and progressives need to get a handle on if single-payer is ever going to get real traction in Washington. So look, again, that is an important consideration. You're correct in pointing that out. However, again, I have a problem with the presentation, and maybe this is just more me than her, but this is the way I'm reading it. Basically, you can have health care for everyone, or you can have jobs for low-income women, but you can't have both. But why not? Why can't we have both? That's an interesting question, and maybe that's one that she's trying to grapple with, and maybe that's why she wrote this article in the first place. Now, further in, she gets into a very heartbreaking example of her own life, and I guess this really explains where she's coming from. She writes that about 14 years ago, when my dad was sick with cancer and unable to work, my mom found a job at the hospital in my rural hometown of Arkansas. The hospital was hiring everyone, it seemed. My mom found herself working with huge numbers of women who only had high school educations and had been out of the workforce for some number of years to take care of their children. This wasn't just an Arkansas thing. In many rural areas across America, the local hospital has traditionally been the largest local employer. Now look, hospitals do employ a lot of people, and that's great. It's great that people have jobs. And not only that, but I feel for her and her family and what she went through. Look, I had my own family member go through cancer. My father also had cancer. Now, it's not near her situation. My dad actually did very, very well, and he beat cancer, and he had really good insurance, and he had a very understanding boss. So, look, my situation with my dad a couple of years ago was very fortunate, and I realized not a lot of people have that. And that's the point. Not everybody does have that, especially if you're in rural Arkansas. You may not have a good job or health insurance, and even if you do, you still might not be able to pay your deductibles in order to afford your health insurance. That's the reason that we're fighting for Medicare for all. But her story continues. She says, in addition to their own staffs, hospitals tend to create an ecosystem of doctors, pharmacists, physical therapists, and other medical professionals who need people to answer phones and keep track of patient files. Well, of course, that makes sense. She said, my mom worked her way up to handle patient billing. Another friend of mine moved back to our hometown and got a job at a local doctor's office as a file clerk. Nearly every time I step into a doctor's office in Arkansas and around the country, there are women behind the desk. That's true. In fact, she has stats that point that out. More than 80% of people who call themselves file clerks are women. Physicians' offices and hospitals employ a lot of these people. While the wages aren't amazing, roughly $12 to $15 on average, hey, $15 minimum wage, I'm just saying, these are inside an office jobs that generally involve sitting at a desk, which is to say they are not menial. The same is true for many of the administrative jobs done in medical office settings. There's a whole career path at for-profit colleges called medical billing, and these jobs pay pretty well. More than $18 an hour nationally. Like many jobs in the healthcare industry, the long-term trends for job growth here are strong, especially since the Affordable Care Act boosted insurance enrollment. These are jobs that can lead to promotions and raises at a time when upward mobility is awfully hard to come by. Now, the problem is that a good portion of what many of these workers do is relationships and billing, and keep track of payments from insurance companies the middleman Bernie Sanders wants to be rid of. Yeah, that's because all that stuff does add a lot of administrative cost to healthcare, which makes it unaffordable for some people. Now look, this argument is sort of like the argument that's being used against people who want to end things like for-profit prisons. Well, what about all the jobs we're going to lose if we close those prisons? We can't shut those prisons down. What about the people with the jobs? They're going to be unemployed. Yes, I understand that. And that sucks. But the entire purpose of a for-profit prison is immoral. Making a profit off incarceration. Now, they also use this as an argument against doing things about climate change. For example, if you shut down the coal mines, I'm not going to have a job anymore. How am I going to feed my family? Yes, I understand that, and we want to do something to help you. But also, got to keep in mind that if we keep burning coal, the coal that you mine, we're going to fuck up the planet even more. And that's going to lead to disaster. So, look, it's a flawed argument. And look, and I hate when people use it because it's like, so you mean we can't do these things because there's somebody that might lose their job? That means we can't progress from anything. We can't progress on any issue and change any sort of technology. That's not good. And look, in capitalism, there are for-profit industries that grow up around things that shouldn't have a profit incentive to begin with. Again, healthcare, education, prison. Why? Because it gives a perverse incentive to base all the decisions in that industry around the profit motives of giant corporations. See, it's that kind of thing that had people denied health insurance before the ACA, okay? And why colleges would rip off students like, for example, ITT Tech and Trump University, because they could, because they made a profit. Yes, those companies all employed people, but that does not necessarily mean that they're inherently good and should be protected. Now, that said, Potts continues, and she wants to make it very clear that she's a supporter of single payer. And she even quoted Elizabeth Warren in this article. She says, and then argues that Elizabeth Warren is right. We would be better off as a society living in a more humane system like the one Bernie Sanders envisions. However, she goes on to say that, quote, it's almost impossible to imagine such a massive shift in 1/6 of America's economy not hurting people along the way. And I fear that because most likely victims are low-income women, this will be ignored, even if Democrats are the party that needs their votes. Again, this is not about votes. This is about making sure that everybody has health care so they don't die. But look, it's a valid concern nonetheless. And I'm going to keep repeating that what she talks about is something that we are having conversations about. And the problem is the way that I think it's presented is that it pits low-income women against the people who are dying because they can't afford health insurance. When really we should be against the companies that, for one reason, don't offer a living wage, where people can actually go and make a living wage. And not only that, but lack of advancement in the workplace, especially for women, things like that. Okay, and look, if you get Medicare for all, you know who also that helps? Women. That also helps low-income women, and also helps cancer patients. And look, let's be honest, this does kind of hit home with me a little bit, right? Now, she talked about medical secretaries. In fact, she said that they alone numbered more than 500,000 in 2016. Well, look, my wife's going to be a medical secretary, right? She's going to school. She's in college right now. Do I want her job to be eliminated? No, of course not. However, we would also rather that people have single payer so that everybody could have health care and insurance, okay? And look, having single payer will help millions more than it will hurt. Because again, it helps everyone. Now, she goes on further to ask about the women. Where is the concern for them? Well, there is concern. I have concern. we're all talking, like, we've had this conversation, and I've talked to a lot of people who do have this concern. And again, it's super valid, right? But do we allow that concern? And this is the question. Do we allow that concern to continue to prop up an immoral healthcare system that allows people to die because they can't afford health insurance? Even under the ACA, which is by far not perfect. Do we allow that concern to allow these people to die? Now, she also writes, maybe we romanticize this bureaucratic healthcare work less because it is the unsung labor of women who get up early every morning to get their kids to school and need a job where they can clock in and out at specific times every day and be home to cook dinner. Or maybe we don't think much about these people because we still all see women's work as disposable. Look, man, again, if you want to talk about sexism, there are certainly people who think like that. And there are certainly a lot of sexist people around. But are they the majority? No. Especially when it comes to the people that are pushing Medicare for all. That is certainly not the majority. Progressives, by nature, are not sexist. And I certainly hope that she's not implying that they are. And if she is, let me know. Or if she's not. I'm just trying to figure out exactly what she means by this. And look, again, people who are pushing Medicare for all, we are thinking about these people. And there are good points about these job losses. And some people are like, well, we gotta go slow to let the people adapt to this. You know, or we can't fully go to a single payer system. We should just do a public option instead so we can save all these jobs. So I'm really worried about these jobs. I understand that. And again, you're coming from a good place. But again, do we stop societal progress and continue to protect an immoral system in order to save a few jobs? And you could make this argument again across all these different industries, whether it be for-profit prisons, for-profit schools, and you know, etc. Right? Now, finally, she writes, whenever America talks about how best to take care of workers displaced by a changing economy, there's always some gesture towards job training or increasing access to education. Now, look, I know, and I know usually the talk of that is bullshit, okay? I don't think we should increase access to education. I think we should just give them access. We should give them education by instituting a tuition-free college. You know, if you want to go to a public university or a public college, that should be tuition free. That's something that I advocate for. Okay. Now, she also says that there's no doubt that more and better healthcare would lead to some new jobs in home healthcare, nursing assistants, and other such gigs. But then she asks, well, what if every woman doesn't want to become a nurse? Well, she doesn't have to. However, she then says, what other jobs could people find, especially in rural America? I fear there would be low-end retail jobs that would tend to be worse in almost every way, uncertain hours, low pay, constant standing. And look, I totally understand that concern as well. But that actually makes the case for more government investment in industry and also a living wage. So those are things that we could actually address. In fact, she does talk about that. She says, if we lived in a country with a stronger social safety net, then a potential shock to an industry that employs many of our least educated workers will be less concerning. And that's very interesting. But think about this, right? If we had a massive push towards Medicare for all, and we had a Congress in there that would actually pass something like that, well, wouldn't you think that they would also pass other things that were also as progressive? That they would push for a higher social safety net? It's not just about one thing. It's not just about one policy. It's about a collection of policies in order to help create a more stable, stronger America and better America for workers. So I think she doesn't see all those other things that would go along with Medicare for all that would help absorb the shock to that system. And look, maybe all she's doing is trying to raise awareness to that, and that's fine. Now, she says, like I said, As long as we're living in the United States of America, the people cheering for single payer need to come up with a plan to help the workers it threatens to leave behind. And again, I do agree with that. Just like the coal miners, we can't leave these people in the medical industry behind. But we also can't stop progress on this issue to prop up an industry that does not work for the benefit of everyone, that works for the benefit of their donors. Now, finally, I also want to point out here that some of the biggest advocates of single payer are women. And not only that, but people working in the healthcare field. For example, the national nurses, the nurses union, female doctors, prominent women activists. And not only that, but look, the bill itself has a lot of stuff in there for reproductive rights. It would actually provide comprehensive reproductive care for women, including abortions. It would eliminate the Hyde Amendment. And so those are the things that are in Medicare for All that would also benefit women and working women. And look, they wouldn't have to worry about losing their insurance, working women. If they lose their jobs or getting a lower paying job with less hours, they would still end up having insurance in that situation. So, look, unfortunately, a lot of people under the ACA still have jobs that are tied to insurance benefits. Medicare for All gets rid of that. Medicare for All would actually save those families a lot of money. So look, while I do agree with a lot of her valid points, I still think that single payer will be a net benefit, even for some of those who will see some job losses. And look, we have to help them, right? And there are a lot of things that we could push for to help those same women that will be affected. And if the whole point here is to make sure that we realize and understand that we need to discuss those things, wonderful. Trust me, we do understand, we do know, and we're very, very open to having that discussion and actually leading the fight on those issues. If the point is something else, then I don't quite understand it. Okay. One more here before we round out the day. Now, whenever Bernie Sanders talked about his political revolution of electing progressives to office, Republicans and some centrist Democrats would scoff. Oh, Bernie Sanders, he wants to elect progressives. Nobody likes progressives. The establishment is awesome. That's why everybody's center-right. The country's center-right, right? Bernie progressives, they could never win in areas, especially areas where Donald Trump won, because those people are all deplorables. Oh, and what is the Democratic Party doing? No, we need to focus on rich white Republicans if we want to win. We got to go to the center. We got to go even further to the right, which was Hillary Clinton's strategy. Okay. Well, why don't you tell that strategy to the two Bernie-crats who just won their elections? Now, the Observer is reporting that as recent as last week, Bernie-crats have been racking up victories in Trump country. Mike Sonato writes, in Oklahoma, Democrat Jason Rosencrantz won a special election for state representative in a district that Donald Trump won by over 10 percentage points. Rosencrantz, a teacher and Bernie Sanders supporter, received a boost from Oklahoma's Our Revolution chapter. Now look, upon hearing that, I'm sure some establishment Democrats will say things like, well, of course he won over a Trump district. He's both racist and a sexist. Ha! Bernie bros. No, actually, as Sonato reports, an integral part of Rosencrantz's campaign was arguing against the influence of corporations and special interests on the state government. Well, what do you know? Some people who voted for Trump really just hated the establishment. And look, the American people overall, by the way, and there are polls to back this up, think that corporations have too much influence on our government. This isn't a right or left issue. Both sides agree. They don't want government bought off by giant corporations. Who knew? Who knew? Now, let's go to another victory, this time in New Hampshire. Democrat Charlie St. Clair also defeated his Republican opponent in a district Trump won by 16 percentage points. Now, how did he win? Did he have more money? I don't know. Did he run on identity politics? No, actually. St. Clair told The Observer The reality is what I've told people right from the get-go is that I'm willing to listen to anybody and to work with anybody and to listen to constituents. It really wouldn't be my job to go down there and say, well, this is how I feel, and I really don't care how my constituents feel. Well, you would be different than 90% of Congress. Now, he also says, I go down there and I have my way of looking at things, but the reality is I've got to remember, and I will remember, that I'm down there representing the constituents of all the people in the district. That's how I'll act. That's how I'll perform, is with that in mind. Now, St. Clair also explained that his campaign transcended the usual political battles in which candidates hide behind party labels and attack one another based on partisanship, which alienates voters. Now, look, we got our corners at the Democratic corner, Team Democrat, Team Republican. Turns out most of the American public, they're in the middle. They're independents. And actually, both parties are a minority in America. Now, again, that makes sense if you're going to appeal to independence. If you're going to appeal to if you're going to go past party labels, which, look, I got to admit, does hold a lot of people down. Now, he continues, at the same time, I'm going to uphold the values that I think are important, but always keep that in mind what my constituents would want. I told people that, and I think that's what a lot of people want to hear today. I think people are tired of this constant fighting between I'm a Democrat, you're a Republican, or I'm a Republican, you're a Democrat. The bottom line is we're all Americans, and we just need to do what's best for everybody. That's how I look at it. I think that maybe that resonated with people because obviously a lot of Republicans voted for me. Now, look, let's be honest. I think some of this support is because Trump's toxic. Trump turned out to be another part of the establishment. He put in people at Goldman Sachs into his cabinet, and he basically gave corporate America a hand job, giving them everything they ever wanted. But I think it's also because the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are both deeply unpopular. As I said, the Democrats, they're not doing much better. They're also deeply unpopular. But here's the thing, right? When you put an establishment Republican versus a Democrat who is not a member of the establishment, who is more grassroots and actually listens to people and does what they want, well, more likely they're going to win. Same thing as you put an establishment Democrat against a so-called populist Republican. I mean, look at the example of Dave Brat, who won Eric Cantor's seat by railing against the banks. Turns out Republican voters also hate being screwed by big banks and corporations. Who knew? Maybe if you were to appeal to populism, you might actually win. Now, Senato makes the point that, quote, the success of grassroots progressive energy is what will ultimately bring the Democratic Party back into favor. Democratic leaders need to decide if they're going to obstruct the movement to save the status quo or embrace it for the greater good of the party and of the country. Now, if they decide to save the establishment, well, then just like the Republicans, they're going to remain the party of the wealthy and the corporations, and they're also going to remain deeply, deeply unpopular, and they're not going to win back seats. The way I see it, it's just going to go back and forth to this. Republicans win this. People are sick of Republicans because they're shitty policies, they're shitty corporate policies. Then they vote for Democrats who also have similar shitty corporate policies. And they just keep going back and forth. I guess that's beneficial for politicians, for some politicians, or not. Or we could actually go to a system where politicians actually represent the constituents. And we can do that by getting the money out of politics and not taking large donations from super PACs and giant corporations. Bernie Sanders shows you how. He ran an entire campaign where he took $27 from regular people, and he used that to campaign. I'm just saying. There is a way for the Democratic Party to serve their constituents and get back into favor, but only if they choose to do it. So, again, are you going to defend the establishment, or are you going to embrace the grassroots? Your choice, Democrats. Your choice. Okay. That's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. I do have a lot of packing to do, so I got to get back to it. But thank you all for watching. Make sure to give me a like and a share if you haven't already. love you guys. Thanks so much for watching. We'll be back tomorrow. Not sure on Friday yet, so we'll see on that. Again, we're gonna kind of play it by ear until we get moved into the new place. So we'll try to be here tomorrow. Love you guys, and remember, change begins with you. We'll see you later, TYT Nation. Have a great afternoon.